Hi, welcome to the first part of our tutorial where we actually start making some sounds. And I think it is wise, even if you don't start the creative process using a kick drum, I think it's wise to have a kick drum ready, especially when when a kick drum happens every beat and occupies a vast percentage of your sonic material. I think you need to have a kick drum ready to go that does the job, will do the job going into the future of your track, and will do the job right down to the point of mix down, mastering on the dance floor, in the DJ's headphones. It's the kick. So we're going to focus a bit on the kick. I've done something a little bit different with this project than I normally do. I've got the kick going on 2 channels. That does not mean that we have 2 kicks. We have identical kicks, and I'm just playing them 1, 2, 1, 2. We can have a quick listen so as to avoid any confusion. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Now, what I'm going to do is, before we even go in and start producing the kick drum, I just want to show you why I'm using this for this techno track. Basically, instead of my whole thing is, especially with techno music, which is it draws on some very basic things, especially modern techno. We're looking at frequencies, we're looking at how things move and flow. It's very unorthodox music in terms of the vast musical canon, but it is quite primal. It has an urgency, it has a repetition, and I'm really big on things like call and response, totally something that would happen in the wild, and the call and response of 2 kick drums when they're identical is a bit of an interesting thing. I'm just going to put an extra return track in here just so I can show you what I mean when I want to split up 2 kicks to create a bit of a call and return. We're not going to do that actually in our jam. I'm going to do that way down the track. But just so you understand the concept behind me splitting them up, which gives you a sort of alternative freedom, a sort of shortcut if you want to process the 2 kicks differently there. I'm just going to throw in a quick audio, just going to throw in an audio effect, a reverb, standard reverb. On here, we're going to turn it up 100%, and we're just going to do the reverb on the second kick here. And you can have a listen. The reverb sort of functions like a clap would on a very standard rock, house, or techno beat. And that is pretty much the essence of why I've got 2 kicks in this project. It's something different for us to do, and it's something different to work with, but you can also process them differently, either in this creative initial stage or even later down the track during your mix down, during your arrangement. It also gives you the opportunity of doing some different drum programming with your kick if you so desire. That is the only reason behind me having 2 kicks here. There is nothing outstandingly technical or crazy or some trick. It is just there to open some things up and make it a bit easier to create a bit of a sort of call and response at any point down the track with the 2 kicks. So let's get rid of that reverb and let's open up these kicks. Now remember, they are identical. Before we even go into program the kick drum and to design it, I like to throw, if you have a look here, audio effects of Ableton, native audio effect. I like to throw a utility on. I think having a utility on every channel, as you can see here, even I've got a utility on every channel. I don't control my volumes here. I tend to control the volume here in utility, and since I think it could have been this Ableton 10 or maybe back in 9, it has a much better control of your sort of volume and whatnot. You can go down to 0. It used to linger in the background. It is much cleaner and better for all intents and purposes now. But I throw a utility on, just going to delete that one, And because we are working with a kick drum, we want it to stay mono. So I click mono. I turn the gain down a couple. There's 0. Just to give us a little bit of extra room, just in case we're already close to clipping. When we design our kick drum, we want to keep the gain staging all the way through correct. Gain staging, look, in my simple layman's terms, is keep everything a little bit under 0 along your whole processing path, so that it never clips, but also so that it's not too quiet, just so that right at the end you have a nice level to work with that still gives you headroom. No clipping, no distorting along the way. The same works when you play with live instruments through a mixing desk. You need to worry about gain staging. So do you in Ableton. And that's the only reason why I have a utility here, so that we make sure we stay in mono, which with Kick 2 we're going to pretty much have a good strong signal anyway. But I just have that on so that I don't accidentally change this or hit this or do something. I put this on mono and I keep the volume down a little bit. So let's open up Kick 2. As we know, we went into our VSTs, loaded a kick onto here. Now, I have it nice and big for us to see here. Now, I have this saved as Vance Kick G134 Lockdown. Now, why the long name? Well, long names are useful sometimes. I think apart from the fact that I did this during a lockdown, I mean, it is 2020 as I'm doing this still. And I made this kick this year, and it's in G, as you can see here. I've really focused on having the whole thing in G, no extra harmonic components, a very, very basic thing in G. 134, yes, if you program in things at a different BPM, you will have to change your kick drum here. It will then either be shorter or longer, the tail, than you need it to be, and that is what's so great about using a kick designer like this. You can create an exact length of what your kick drum will do, which means that here in amp we can control the amplitude of the kick. So it's basically, we have nothing too out of the ordinary here from default. We can go and have a look at the default, for example. Let's just create a new channel here. So create a new MIDI track, and we put a kick in just to show you. This is how kick 2. This is how your kick will come up to you as you load it up, and that is the default sound. There are different defaults to work with. We are just modifying the default here with our kick drum. I'll just get rid of that quickly. So we are taking everything to be in G. It's around 449 milliseconds, and we're naming it and saving it. And what I'll do is I'll just show you again. We'll create a MIDI track just for those who don't use Kick 2 very often. I am moving the notes around here to create a particular tone at that point. The numbers mean where they are, which octave. So we have things going down to the first octave on a keyboard. That's the easiest way to explain it to all of us who are not familiar with using pianos and octaves. But basically, it's in the key of G. We are going to keep it there. And I'm going to slide around these little components. And I'm going to keep these straight, these lines. I'm not going to move them too much. We're not going to focus on this too much. There's plenty of things where you can see how to use Kick 2 by doing this. But what I want to show you back in the already developed kick drum is more to do with the amplitude and the kick. So let's go back. Let's get rid of this. And let's design our kick drum. Let's have a listen to it. That's our kick drum. Big. Now, as we listen to it, I'm going to change a few things here. Now, you could hear that this particular point here was really changing the pitch. And that's because we have a fair bit of amplitude happening around that time, and also the majority of this kick drum is going to be in G1, as you can see here. The reason why we're having it in G, for me personally, listening to stuff on big systems, G1 at about 49 Hertz. F is also a good one. I make a lot of stuff under an alter ego, under a different alias, using F1, that which is at about 43 point something Hertz. 40, 50, 50 something Hertz, that is sort of, it's sub bass, but it's also still percussive bass. You can hear the thud and the boom and everything. And the majority of our kick will occupy this area down here. I'm just going to go back to, see, as you can see, I've got an F1 saved as well at 134, and I've got one saved in G. And they're both the same length, but they have a different note that we're using. So what we can do is we can go right in. See, this is just your little microscope of your wave over here. And you can have a look at the certain points. I like to have these sort of changing points here, sort of close to either a trough or a peak, just so I know. I mean, it sounds sonically different too. There are some wonderful mathematical reasons why, but it's also a good point to see where different things go. As you can see here, we can really, really go in and have a look, and you'll hear the difference. One sec. There's a bit more drive sort of on the transient because we're hitting that point. So we'll go back there. Sorry about that. Yeah, so this is basically the kick as I want it to be. Reason being, as I've explained, G is a great note to work with. Also, for those of us who have limited sort of theoretical musical things, G's a great root note, goes with very common things like the note C, for example. Yeah, so this is the general curve of our kick drum. We can alter these points to basically highlight different parts of that wave, what we have. But this is a good example of a sine wave with a good thump at the front, and the thump gets its nice little click, as they're called in kick 2, but this sort of little transient thwack sort of thump part of the kick over here. And I've used one here in kick called Hard 16, and you can hear and scroll through all the different clicks over here. I've chosen this one. We can have a listen to some others. And as you can hear, the one that I've chosen, Hard 16, it seems to blend very well with the sine wave at this length. And I've got it happening every half beat because we've got the split kicks happening there. That is purely the reason why I chose it. There's no real technical reason other than it sounds good. And we can never lose sight of the fact that you want the kick to sound good, but you also want it to be technically correct. And that's where this helps a lot. So to get this nice and easy here, There are many things we could do beyond that to create crazy stuff with our kick drum, but we want this to be utilitarian, a thump with a bit of sub, something that will work with other components and specifically with a bass sound. So we're going to get some sub bass happening later. We don't want too much boom. We don't want too much decay. We also don't want it to be too short and too weak in any capacity. It needs to be a very balanced kick. A little bit of that 909 punch with a bit of that 808 boom. Nothing too crazy, and everything in its place. And I just find that in this instance, this hard 16 works very well. We also have another click under here, but first we'll just listen to this hard 16 by itself. And listening to it by itself, it's we can hear that it's perhaps not even perfectly in tune with our kick, but it rubs off nicely and creates a nice sound together. Here is the click number 2, and we can solo this off the bat and have a listen. And it's a sort of little empty, hollow sounding percussive thing by the time I've turned this up here. So this is your low frequency and your high frequency. And this is basically just taking a bunch of the bottom end out. And this one took a bunch of the tone up the top, a bunch of the treble out, going this way. So we can listen to them together. And of course, there is the opportunity to turn them up if you want to go down here and have a look. But it's about finding that sweet spot. And what I've done here is I've scrolled through and I've found 2 that I like together, and I've altered their pitch slightly, as you can see here, until I'm happy with the sound and that there's no weird little artifact or sort of delayed percussive sound. They just need to gel together, and I'll show you what I mean by not gelling that well together. See, that works, but it sounds almost like it's a hi-hat when it's pitched right up there. So you can play around with these things very quickly and just get something that works very well and come back in and clean it up later. So we can use this kick for now. I'm just going to go back to my original as is. And if we need to, we can always come back later. But what we need is a serviceable, functional kick to begin with. The most important other thing before we process it anymore is the amp. And basically we can zoom it up here, as we did before. And we are going from 0 to hero quite quickly. We're catching a fair bit of that transient peak there. And we can make it smaller again. And we slowly peel that off. And what I've done here is I've sort of come back up for that bigger bit, because I wasn't happy to begin with. Because, one sec, we'll just have a listen. And while the kick is still strong, those clicks came through more, and it lacked some impact. And just altering this sort of section here, it seemed to work. And every kick is going to be different. So I would say that when you've got your pitch correct, which doesn't take very long, you find the correct length of your kick. The amplitude is really, really important, and every time, and even with different clicks and the way that your ears will perceive everything, it's always good to come back here and alter your amplitude. But anyway, that is the kick. Generally, I have added some distortion here on the wave, just about sort of 30% here. I've added the distortion sort of with not too much low end, not too much high end. I've added 50% of the mix. I like to have a bit of that distorted drive happening. And talking about drive, we have the drive here, this saturated, distorted, but nothing is overblown here. We can just have a listen to the kick without it briefly. As you can see, adding the distortion does not distort it in the traditional sense of what you're hearing. It is not a disgusting distorted sound. It is a wonderful distorted sound that is picking up on those aspects of the kick drum that we like. And here the drive. In this instance, the drive works beautifully and just fattens the kick out without losing any of that wonderful sort of thud and thwack that we have. I've kept the sub control pretty easy just here on the sine wave setting. No added harmonics. You can always come in and change the pitch here. So if you are finding that the kick drum is not in the right pitch, instead of having to go in and program all the individual parts here, you can just drop it down. So there we have it, the click, the two clicks, which are not very loud, but they just pick up that little transient start of the kick to allow that thud to come through and a little bit of sub component just through this end part here. That's the kick, pretty simple. But at the same time exactly serviced for us and what we're going to do with this techno track. Clean, thuddy, boomy, nothing too overblown, but fat enough to work through the whole project.
Thanks everyone for watching. We really appreciate the support from you guys. If you liked this video, then smash that like button, and if you want to be notified about new content, hit the subscribe and the bell notifications. Peace!